You've probably heard that old expression, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Well, back in the radio days, Fred Allen, who was a big radio star, once quipped, imitation is the sincerest form of television. And that's definitely true, because once a successful TV show appeared, a bunch of copycat shows also appeared, with executives hoping that these would be safe bets and make a lot of money too and be successful also. Well, of course, the same thing happens with movies. Just one example, Barbie was such a huge hit that there are several films now based on other Mattel toys. Can't wait to not see any of those. But all of this brings us to today's episode. This is the Kazdoy Closet. I'm Kazdoy. That's my closet full of all the stuff that I love. And today, in the wake of the 1974 blockbuster film Death Wish with Charles Bronson, another Vigilante film came along a few years later. Let's check it out. Today's film is Fighting Back from 1982, 98 minutes long, in color. This is about a Philadelphia shop owner who's completely fed up with all the crime in his neighborhood, so he forms a civilian patrol / vigilante group and begins fighting back. A lot of issues involved here, none too deep, of course, but some of the issues include crime, violence, race, politics, government. The film actually begins with actual news footage of crimes and violence in the streets, and it states that violent crime has increased by over 500% since JFK was assassinated. And the narrator in the footage even says, "No one is safe in this world." So vigilante groups actually did spring up in reality across the country, probably most notably the Guardian Angels in New York City. They had their own uniforms. They would patrol certain streets and subways. When I was in New York once, I saw them, and they're still active to this day, actually. Well, at one point, our main character goes to the police after something violent happened in his family, but he gets no help from them because they're understaffed and they're underfunded. So he figures, let's take this problem into our own hands. There's lots of fighting in Fighting Back, so truth in advertising there. The film has kind of a gritty, exploitative feel, and the fight scenes are actually pretty good. They're pretty realistic. They're not slick at all, so the stunt work is good too. Once the main character forms his vigilante group, these guys really dig in. I mean, immediately with bats and with their fists, and they go right to the source of where this crime is happening. Our main character, he's a real hothead. It doesn't take much to set him off. This is an action / revenge film, basically, and so don't expect any complex characters here. Eventually, this vigilante group becomes a threat, kind of, to various factions in this community. For example, they're a threat to the criminals, and the criminals want to get revenge on these guys. The local politicians are threatened because this main guy, he's becoming kind of a folk hero, so they're afraid he might run for office and take their place. The local mafia is kind of threatened, but they're just concerned that they don't want these guys encroaching on their turf at all. And the area's black population and leadership feel threatened too. More on that a little bit later. The cast includes Tom Skerritt as our main character. Usually he's not the lead actor in films. His first big film role was MASH in 1970, but he was also in Alien, The Dead Zone, and a lot of television. Patti LuPone plays his wife. She's probably best known for her stage work. She won a Tony for the title role in Evita on stage. And when I think of her, I think of these videos. I think you can find them on YouTube, where she's performing on stage and she gets pissed off at someone in the audience and just starts yelling at them. And she's done this a couple of times. Recently, she was in a film that I did not care for, but a lot of people loved, Beau is Afraid. Yaphet Kotto shows up here too. He has an important role as a black leader in this Philadelphia community who calls Skerritt out on his racism. And I think that's really important here because you notice immediately that all the guys they're targeting, this vigilante group is targeting, are all black guys. So it's important to have this guy point this out so it doesn't just lay there and not addressed. Yaphet Kotto also is an alien with Tom Skerritt. He was in Live and Let Die. He was in A Blue Collar and Midnight Run. And interestingly, Yaphet Kotto was on the short list to play Captain Jean-Luc Picard in the series Star Trek The Next Generation. There are 2 screenwriters involved in Fighting Back, and get this, one guy wrote the screenplay for Flashdance, the other guy wrote the screenplay for Straw Dogs. Now, can you think of 2 films that are more opposite each other? The director here was Louis Teague. He also directed Cujo and Alligator and a lot of television. The music, I thought, was the biggest misstep here, the biggest weakness. It's very syrupy and melodramatic during some semi-romantic scenes, and during some action scenes it just didn't seem to match what was happening on the screen. So I was surprised how much of a weakness that was. So my rating for Fighting Back, I'm going to give this one 3 punches out of 5 because there's a lot of punching going on. For an 80s exploitation film, it does what it's supposed to do. I'm not a big exploitation film guy. I have no nostalgia for the 80s because of my age. I'm not old enough. I'm too old to be nostalgic for the 80s. But what's on this disc? This is an Arrow disc. It's Region A. I picked this up, I think, about a year ago at a Barnes & Noble sale, half off, so it was $20. Definitely worth it for this disc. There is a poster. There is reversible art. So the poster has this artwork here, and then the reversible art looks like this. So both those pictures are on the poster. You flip them over. There is a booklet, which is short but quite informative. It has articles about crime films set in Philadelphia. It has an article about Vigilante movies, and then it has a Q&A with the director. There's also a video interview with the director that's 30 minutes long. He talks about his association with Roger Corman and with Martin Scorsese and his experiences making this film, and he comes across as a really great guy. There's also an interview 20 minutes long with the camera operator. So that is Fighting Back. Now, before we wrap this up, a couple of the things we've been up to lately. One was we went to the Academy Museum in Los Angeles, and that's a fairly new museum, and that's the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. And I wanted to go there because they had an exhibit called John Waters, the Pope of Trash, and I wanted to get there before it ended. It ended August 4th. So a very extensive overview of John Waters' career, to think of how he started, and now he has an exhibit in a major museum in a major city is kind of mind-blowing. But what an interesting story. I'm not a huge John Waters fan, but I think he's an interesting guy. I think he's funny. I would recommend his book Shock Value, which I read many years ago, but it's still in print. And it's all about his story of how he started getting into filming, and it's pretty wild stuff and very interesting stuff. And this exhibit really showed all his various obsessions. And it starts with his very early films that didn't even have any sound, all the way to some of his more current films like Hairspray and A Dirty Shame and Pecker and stuff like that. There's posters everywhere, and there's props, and there's his notes and all kinds of material there. So I'm hoping that it's a traveling exhibit, so maybe it'll come to a town near you. The other thing we did is I went solo to see Dead and Company. I'm a big Grateful Dead fan. I never got a chance to see them in concert, and they've been in several incarnations since. Dead and Company is their latest incarnation, John Mayer taking over the Jerry Garcia role, and they were appearing at the Sphere in Las Vegas. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to see Dead and Company, I'm going to go to the Sphere to see them there. It was like a bucket list thing for me. And man, let me tell you, this venue is incredible. It's state of the art. It's kind of like if you ever fly first class, how do you go back to coach in a way? But quite a memorable experience. So if you can ever make it out there for a band or a concert that you appreciate, I definitely recommend the Sphere in Las Vegas. So otherwise, feel free to leave a comment or suggestion down below here. Leave a thumbs up. Don't leave a thumbs down. Subscribe would be great. share this with your friends and neighbors. Subscribing is free. Also free is we're on the Letterboxd app under the Kazdoy closet. There's a link in the notes down below. That's where we leave brief written reviews of other things we're watching that we don't talk about here. Most recently, the films Love Lies Bleeding and The Devil's Partner. So check that out if you want to. Otherwise, hope you like this episode. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.